Neville Goddard, 1963 lectures, The Shaping of the Unbegotten, May 3rd, 1963. Tonight's subject is the shaping of the unbegotten. We are told in Paul's letters to the Ephesians, the 5th chapter, the very first verse, be ye imitators of God as dear children. So we must find out what God did. We are told he called a thing that is not as though it were, and the unseen became seen. If you're talking biblical records, that's from Paul's letter to the Romans, the 4th chapter, 17th verse. He calls a thing that is not seen as though it were. The one who had the vision, and I turn to one, that is Blake. Blake said, many suppose that before creation, all was solitude and chaos. That is the most pernicious idea that could ever enter the mind, for it takes away all sublimity from the Bible and limits all existence to creation and chaos. It's the biggest load of all, in my opinion. And what do universities teach? Now, listen to the next statement. Eternity exists, and all things in eternity, independent of creation, which was an act of mercy. Vision of the Last Judgment, page 614. Let me repeat it. Eternity exists, and all things in eternity, independent of creation, which was an act of mercy. No scientists today believe that. They think we came out of chaos, so that the whole thing began to evolve out of something that wasn't. And here, one with the vision tells us eternity exists and all things in eternity, independent of creation, which creative act was a merciful act. Now, what does he mean by it? Well, I have had the vision, and I know that Blake is telling the truth, for I am telling the truth based upon my visions. Everything in this world is forever. What you now see, what former people saw, what they are going to see, everything is forever. These are parts of the eternal structure of eternity. This body, this little lectern, everything in the world is but a little part of the eternal structure of eternity. It didn't come into being at all. It always was. All the stars, everything on earth, all part of the eternal structure of eternity. Now he speaks of now he speaks of creation as an act of mercy. Here you are as a body, as I am as a body, and all these bodies, everything, and then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. But first, let me point out a picture of eternity, the eternal moment point, which we are in existence of. Let's say this is our now, and this is a supposed idea called the future, and this is the supposed idea called the past, which these are only, we know this is a shadow. This is a 3D self we're living in, 3 dimensions. It's a shadow of our 4D inner self, which is where water, the still waters are, where we make a movement upon those waters. And then we have the 3D effect, which is in the shadow of our now. Our now has within it our creation and our self-concepts, let's call it that, or it could be, it doesn't matter whichever way you want to look at this. This could be all different probable versions of your existing life and your different self-concepts. It could be you in this life and another life. This can take meaning for every single version, but what we want to use it for in this instant is it is a reflection of what is now. In your right now, I and my Father are one. My Father is greater than I. The dreamer and the dream are one. The dreamer is greater than the dream. The conceiver and the conception are one. The conceiver is greater than its conception. Everything's coming out of this effervescent, ever simmering, expanding now moment. There's nothing that could have ever been or that will ever be unless it's coming from right now. And this right now is only an is. It's an always. It's not a to be. It's not a was. It's an is. In your effervescent now, you are. As you change your mind about what you want to be or experience or have in your experience, you change only in one place. That's in your now. I know Neville says that people think that he makes the statement, people think that the past is where the present recedes, and he says that that's not so. And he also states that the future is what folds towards the present is what, when you do like a revision, for instance, he's saying that the present, when you revise the past, is folding or moving towards a different future. Well, I don't agree with him there because the future doesn't exist. The past doesn't exist. Only the effervescent, ever-present, eternal point of eternity, which is called now, this moment, this one moment, is the only moment. So I know Neville's using a teaching tool, so I don't begrudge that per se, and it's a very important teaching tool to get inside of revision and understand it and feel it and just start doing it. I understand what he's doing here. But where I'm taking you is a place of understanding to that we see the now, the present moment, as it's what it is. It's an eternity. There's no way to describe what is because it is. You can't describe the beginning of is because it is. There's no beginning. It is an is. It's an always on. They try and say when the sun started or when the moon, meteors, craters, trillions, billions, whatever. Numbers, throw numbers at it and confuse them even more. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Now is creation's beginning. It's right now. You are creating right now in this instant from your thoughts. Your thoughts are the word. You're the words from the lips of God. Those are your thoughts. His voice is your thought. Your desire is his desire. You're from him. He created you, lost himself in you, so that you would wake up and remember you are him. But in so losing himself in you, he had to forget everything. What you're doing is awakening to that memory. There's no past. It's also in a now. Okay? Hopefully that made a little sense. Let's keep working with it because it takes a while to fold it in. Now, he speaks of creation as an act of mercy. Here you are a body and I am as a body, and all these bodies, everything. And then God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. Remember now, he's using plurals here. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. It should tell you a lot right there. Genesis 1:26. And here man is part of the structure of the universe. But here is God saying, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And that is an act of mercy. So he takes man, as I would take a tree and say to you, let us make a tree and mold it into our image after our likeness. Let us give to it the quality that we possess, our creativity. It can't create itself. It simply is a part of the universe. The whole vast world is simply the universe and all part of the structure. God is shaping himself now. God, the unbegotten, is begetting himself, and so he begets himself in me. He begets himself in you. When he completes the act of begetting himself in us, we are God. We are that which will now use the same structure to beget anything that we can conceive of. So God takes man, part of the eternal structure of the universe, and begets himself in man. When he begets himself in man, the state begotten is the one who begot it. God in man, or the thing that came out of man by God's act, is God. Now I'm told, let the individual imitate God as a dear child. And I'm told everything is. Quote, eternity exists and all things in eternity, independent of creation, end quote. So I'm going to create. It all exists independent of creation. Well, how could I do it? I can't think of anything that then doesn't exist. I think of you in unnumbered states of mind. When you like me or dislike me, you're sympathetic or you're unsympathetic. I can think of you in unnumbered ways. But I want to create something now. I want to create something that is lovely for myself. So I bring you into my mind's eye, and then I bring another into my mind's eye, and then I have, in my imagination, a little party. Say a cocktail party, a tea, a dinner. I control the imagery that I brought into my mind. You all exist in eternity, but I bring you without your knowledge, without your consent, and I control the entire moment of time. Make it a minute or 5 minutes, anytime, not too long, I control it. But I so arrange the imagery that it implies something other than what it was prior to the arrangement. I bring you all into my mind's eye, and I allow you to hear something that is taking place. I allow you to see me as you would see me were things as I desire them to be. And so I am begetting something. I am actually shaping myself, the unformed upon the formed. For all things in this world are already part of the structure of eternity. Everything is. So I bring a being from the structure. I bring another breath, it's a man. Another breath, it's a woman. Another breath, blank space. And so I arrange them in my mind's eye that when I put them into that form, then they see me as they would see me were my dream realized. It's my dream, and I am begetting. So I am begetting on the structure of the universe that which did not exist before. So you and I, as living souls, did not exist. But the structure, this garment, always existed. These garments existed. Everything in the world existed, but these living souls did not. And God begot us just like himself, to be a creative being just as he is. So take the same structure and then create and create and create. So be ye imitators of God as dear children. How did he create? Well, this is how he created. He called a thing which was not seen as though it were seen, and the unseen became seen. That's how he does it. So let me go back and requote the brilliant Blake. And may I tell you, I can't read anyone in this world that I would put even near him. I go back into the Bible. Yes, he's equal to all the great prophets of the Bible. He brought into our blank space, today, blank space, understanding, and he said, many suppose that before creation all was solitude and chaos. That is the most pernicious idea that could ever enter the mind, for it takes away all the sublimity from the Bible and then limits existence to creation and chaos. Eternity exists, and all things in eternity, independent of creation, which was an act of mercy. Just imagine if God did not take that which is always eternal, and through this wonderful, intense desire on his part to create humans out of that which was, we would not be here as living, sentient beings, creating. Yes, miscreating, but creating. If you miscreate unnumbered times, you can still create. A miscreation is still a creation. I bring war, revolution, all these horrible things of the world. It's still creating. And eventually, he who has started and stopped, that will bring us into his own likeness and will be one with God. So just as he did it out of the things that are eternal parts of eternity, that this body and this little thing here that will seemingly decay, and this will decay, that the garment will decay, and all will decay. It doesn't really. That's the great illusion. It doesn't really. It is forever. It's to share with the idea about this forever quality. Another way to point the picture is you and I right now sharing this moment I am revoicing Neville's words from the lectern. He spoke them originally. He exists right here. He's speaking these words actively in the present moment because that's the only moment that exists. In this moment, it has a probable future. Now, let's let that present moment be on its own. Neville's delivering this speech, this lecture right here. I'm in the probable future of that lecture, re-vocalizing the lecture for teaching purposes, for learning, value, expansion of this. This moment also has its probable past of Neville actively, literally giving the lecture in present time. I am in present time, right here with you, actively delivering the same words and adding to them commentary. In addition, there's also another probable future. Let's call Neville's lecture the past, probable past. I'm in a probable present. There's also a probable future where this will go into another level. This will go into the level where you're taking the words and you're doing with them what you will. In that probable future, you're also being creative with these words. Neville vocalized them from somewhere. I don't know where. You don't know where. I'm revocalizing them from somewhere. I don't know where. I'm just doing it. I know that they came out of his mouth, but we know that they're from another source. I'm also vocalizing them, so they're putting them back into the ether, putting them back out here. You're taking them. There's a mix going on, and in your probable future, you're becoming, you're learning, you're expanding, you're learning how this works, the law, how to make it work for yourself, how to make your life abundant. You're joining the kingdom, that which is within you already. You're opening that kingdom. Abundance, abundance, abundance. All these probabilities are all about the now, number one. They all can only exist in their now, but they're also helping us expand into our own abundance. We're becoming awake in our kingdom, or awakening the kingdom that is within us. This is a fun little side tangent, but we have to get into the understanding of nowness. Nowness is only ever this moment. Nothing before, nothing after. It's only about right now and what am I going towards my desire? Do I know what my desire is? And am I aiming towards it, or am I taking on all the noise from the side, left, right? Is it constantly derailing me? The main focus is to get towards your desire and don't be distracted. Don't be distracted. So we're using Neville to give us that focus. Neville's actively delivering the speech as we're delivering it. That's how now works. Neville's not gone. He's not decayed. He's actually delivering the speech, the lecture. I know we're dipping deeper. We're dipping under the waves here a little bit, but it's okay. We can swim out a little farther. So just as he did it out of things that are eternal parts of eternity, that this body and this little thing here that will seemingly decay, and this will decay, the garment will decay, and all will decay. It doesn't really. That's the great illusion. It doesn't really. It is forever. Everything in this world is a part of the eternal structure of the universe. And out of all these parts, God then said, let us make man. For we already existed, like hanging on that tree, in my image. We don't make man out of chaos. Man exists. It's part of the structure of the universe. Well, now let us take man, that's part of the structure of the universe, and let us now make him into our image, after our likeness. And so he takes man and he makes man into his image. Now we go back into the book of Genesis and see what he's done with man. A word is used in the book. It's called the tree of life. The man, in some strange way, is expelled because he may eat of the tree of life before he's prepared. Well, if you have a concordance, I have James Strong's concordance. It's an excellent biblical concordance. By the way, it is available. You can still get this. I believe you can also get it digitally. And the word tree is defined as the spine, the backbone, the carpenter, the gallows. Who is hanging on the gallows? It's called the gallows. This word called the tree. It's the gallows. It's the spine. It's the backbone. And it's the carpenter. In other words, the builder, the potter, the creator. And there he hangs upon the tree. Funny coincidence, in my business I started it as a carpenter. And that's what the main push was cabinetry and doing all of that kind of work. And as a carpenter with table saws and planes and skill saws and nails and hammers and air tools and all that fun stuff. It's the carpenter. But the tree is the spine. It's the backbone. And after unnumbered blank space on this called man, he brings out this something that is entirely different. It's himself. It is shaped because he is the unbegotten. And he's shaping himself upon a form. Just as I would take the potter and I would mold the clay upon some form and mold it to my heart's desire. Well, God is molding himself upon man. That's a fascinating double use of words here. As I just mentioned, I used to do the carpentry work, and one of the biggest challenges in that work was the molding. The molding and the chop saws you had to buy to be able to cut this molding was big, ornate pieces of molding that got very fancy around the top of cabinets. We used to do displays in hardware stores. And it got very technical. I mean, really about cutting, precise cutting, joining together, nailing, gluing, doing all these little tricks to make it look just right. It was always about the molding. The molding was the crown achievement of that work when I was doing it. It was the biggest, I know it's a pun, crown molding. It was the biggest challenge at first, and then it became the biggest, I would be sought for the displays I had. They would want me to do the installations in their homes because of what I did in the displays. At first it was something impossible, then it was something totally probable, then it was something that was an old hat. Mold. Just as I would take the potter and I would mold the clay upon some form and mold it to my heart's desire, well, God is molding himself upon man. When he has completed the act as he desires it, there are 3 definite stages where he reveals the completed work. He molds us and molds us and molds us, makes us ever more sensitive, ever more creative, and ever more like himself. And when he is satisfied that we are just as he is, he unveils his way. The unveiling of the work begins with the awakening of himself. And that is called the resurrection. He awakes within the individual in whom he has completed the work. That awakening in the Bible is the resurrection. Then after the resurrection, he goes through a blank space like a bird, and he's born from above. He's self-begotten because the individual who is born cannot conceive of being sired by anyone other than himself. He can't for one moment, when he awakens in the tomb of his skull, believe that he's other than himself. When he comes out of his own skull, he cannot have any feeling, any sensation of having any father or mother. So he's born, then he must be self-begotten. God is so begetting himself that when he begets himself, the thing begotten is God. And he comes out just self-begotten. Then comes a second stage where he has the experience of being a father. Until that moment, he didn't realize that he was. And now, strangely enough, when he sees the symbol which reveals to him fatherhood, there is no mother. He is the father of God's only begotten Son. So he knows now who he is. It took the Son to reveal to him who he really is. Then comes the third symbol. And the third symbol, where the entire veil that separated the two is torn from top to bottom. And from the top of his skull to the bottom of his spine, he is severed in two. And then the 10th chapter, 19th verse of Hebrews tells you the purpose of that severing of blank space. From that moment on, the two become one. They're not two anymore. They were separated by a veil, and the veil was the body of God, having torn the entire thing from top to bottom. And then, strangely enough, you see yourself. And may I quote Blake again, "I behold the visions of my deadly sleep of 6,000 years, dazzling around thy skirts like a serpent of precious stones and gold. I know it is myself, O my divine Creator and Redeemer." Jerusalem, plate 96. At that moment, you see the being that created you, and you are the very being who created you. It's a self-creation. God begot himself on the mold called man. And at that moment, when you see it, after the splitting from top to the bottom, you see this lovely, liquid, golden light. It's you, and you know it. You say, I know it. I know it is my very self, O my divine Creator and Redeemer. And then you, as the very being who created it, you as it, move up now in serpentine form right into Zion. So all go into Zion. All go into the new Jerusalem. So creation is an act of mercy. This, you can't claim, blank space, of a creator. It was always part of the eternal structure of the universe, as those who have taken certain drugs have seen a certain act and recorded it to those who would record what they were seeing. I am seeing a man emptying coal, and strangely enough, on this level of my being, he was always emptying coal. There was never a time in eternity he was not doing what he was doing. Though at the moment it seemed to be he's doing what he's doing because someone ordered coal only at that moment in time. And yet he was always doing what he was doing. Part of the structure of the universe. That we are here tonight, and if you could see it on a higher level, we've always been here. It's part of what I was just describing about the eternal now. This moment we're sharing, let's call it this one. There is no before and after, there's only this one. This is always. This lecture is always. There is no end to it. There is no beginning to it. It is. You, on your end of this lecture, are always. Taking it in, or visually, it is in your now and is a forever. It is always. It doesn't have an end. It doesn't even have a beginning. It is a now, which has eternity. It is a forever. I know we're going deeper. We're going under some big waves, We got to duck dive under those waves. Hold your breath a little while. Hang in there. Paddle a little more. That we are here tonight, if you could see it on a higher level, we have always been here. We are all structures, part of the structure of the universe. But out of these structures, God, in His infinite mercy and intense longing, is begetting Himself. Now let me quote you the 4th chapter, the 12th verse of Job. And a thing. One book calls it a thing. The King James Version calls it a word. The New Bible calls it a thing. And you can call it a thing or call it a word. I think a word conveys it. A word was brought to me. It was brought to me secretly, said Job, which mine ear heard in a slight manner. It was brought to me, it was brought secretly, and my ear heard it in a slight manner. I wasn't quite sure, but I understood what I heard, what he had told me. And then the story of Job in Job 10, he said, you know that I am without guilt. Thou knowest that I am without guilt. Why then dost thou try by torture to extract from me a confession of guilt? Verse 7. Whoa. You know I am without guilt. That's man. Here is man. I know I didn't do a thing to come into this world, but a priest tells me that I have sinned, or my father and mother sinned, because they begot me in this physical state. I know I didn't do a thing. I found myself here. And then my parents must go to church and pay a certain sum of money to the church and confess their mortal sin, because they express the normal, natural function of the body. Yes, millions do that every day of this world, and the church gets richer and richer as they are made to confess their sins. So Job makes the statement, you know I am without guilt. Why then dost thou try to torture to extract from me a confession of sin? And then Job goes through the entire picture of horrors. But in the end of Job, the 42nd chapter, I think it's the 4th or 5th verse, what in the 4th chapter he heard stealthily, a word came to him secretly, coming through the night secretly, and then he said, I have heard of thee with the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see thee. But now my eye sees thee. Verse 5. He has the experience and he knows how true what he heard secretly was when he heard it. But he heard it so quietly. He only heard the word in the wilderness. To see is to know, and to know is to experience. And so he knows it by experience. I can tell you what I experienced and share it with you, and then you can say, I heard it. It was a secret that was revealed. I heard it, but I didn't see it. I didn't experience it, and therefore I didn't know it. I don't know it. I will trust him or will distrust, but I heard it. Then comes the power between the hearing of the word and the fulfillment of that word, where now I've heard of thee with the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see thee. But now my eye sees thee. And may I tell you, I have had a taste of the power in store for all of us when God fulfills his intention. He's begetting himself on us, actually begetting himself. And when he succeeds in begetting himself, we are he. When we are he, I'll show you what will happen because it happened to me. I have glimpsed and I've tasted of this power, and the structure remains forever and forever. I came upon a scene just like this, and it was all animated, all having or seemingly enjoying independent action. They all were at dinner. Dinner was being served. Birds were flying. Leaves were falling. Everything was in action. And it seemed completely independent of my perception. Then at that moment in time, I knew that if I could arrest in me an activity that then at that moment I felt everything would cease. So I arrested the activity and it froze. The whole vast scene, it was arrested. And through the window, a huge big black tree, the leaves were falling. They couldn't fall, and they were arrested in place. They were arrested in space. The birds trying to fly, they were arrested in flight. And everything froze. And there I am observing this part of the structure of the universe. Anyone prior to that moment would have thought they were completely independent of anything external to themselves. Again, back to the original Twilight Zones. There was a couple episodes that had situations like this where a guy would walk into a town and it'd be completely empty, or people would be frozen still, I think. There were so many wondrous episodes that Rod Serling, the guy who created Twilight Zone, put together. Again, Rod Serling used to attend with Lucille Ball, Neville Goddard lectures. And I think a lot of what he learned from Neville and I think in his interpretation, he put this into his writing. Anyone prior to that moment would have thought they were completely independent of anything external to themselves. They could have ordered liver instead of duck. As the little Dennis the Menace said, you mean that you can order anything in this world and you order liver? Oh, liver and onions is good. When you're a kid, I guess it's not so much good. They went into a restaurant and the father had a wonderful menu before him, and all of a sudden the father, who could never get it at home because Dennis wouldn't have it, the mother wouldn't cook it, so in the restaurant he ordered liver. And Dennis's remark was, what, you mean you could have anything and you order liver? Well, here in this restaurant, they could order anything, and whatever they ordered, if it was possible to be served, they would be served. Their thoughts were completely free to do anything, and the birds started from one limb to another, and they were free to make the limb. That's funny, liver and onions. We saw it on the menu, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe, where are we? Maybe 5-6 years ago. We were at the Riverside in Laughlin, Nevada, and we were looking at the menu. We're going to order at the restaurant, and there was classic liver and onions. And I think it had a lot to do with the age of the guests. And I think in those generations, like Dennis the Menace's father in that show, the age was used to that kind of fowl was a very common dish prepared in the home, and it's actually very, very intensely good for you. And it happened to be the cheaper cuts that you would get at the butcher ended up being the ones that were better for you. And the birds, their thoughts were completely free to do anything. And the birds started from one limb to another, and they were free to make the limb. When I appearing upon that scene, I knew that nothing was independent of my perception of it. For I froze the activity in me that allowed action to take place in this world, and everything stood still. The bird didn't fall out of the tree, which caused me, after the experience, to question seriously man's concept of gravitation. For a bird in flight, if arrested, would fall to the ground. A leaf, if arrested, would continue unless some sudden current of air takes it out. But all the leaves that were falling remained just where they were when I arrested them, and the birds in flight remained spatially without falling to the ground. The waitress, she was walking, and she walked not. Those who were dining, they dined not. Everything froze. He couldn't carry that spoon from his soup. He couldn't continue the action of soup to his mouth. And then looking at them, amazed as I was, and then I released the activity in me, and they completed their intention. The diners, dining, dined. The birds, intending to fly, continued the action and completed their intention. And they didn't fall to the ground. All things moved on their intention. So I tasted of the power that is in store for all of us when God completes his intentions in begetting out of these permanent forms something other than this form. This is not the being you're talking to any more than you are the being that I'm looking at. Heck of a sentence. Let's repeat that few sentences because it's very important. So I tasted of the power that is in store for all of us when God completes his intention in begetting out of these permanent forms something other than this form. This is not the being you're talking to any more than you are the being that I'm looking at. This is not the being you're talking to any more than you are the being that I'm looking at. The unbegotten is forming himself, shaping himself on these forms. Blank space. He needs a form, and I need a form to beget something else. So I bring you tonight into my world. I bring another into my world, and then I talk to these two in my world from a certain premise, which, if true, implies I've realized my dream. And so I say to him, you know what's happened? Blank space. But I am begetting something. I am using forms to form the unbegotten. Form what? Well, the unbegotten's name is I am. That's his name. And so I may be in need of a job. Well, the word job is something formed. I am is unformed, the unbegotten. I want to beget something. I want to get a job. And so I bring you in my mind's eye. I bring another in my mind's eye, and we have a little tete-a-tete. And then whatever is taking place must imply I have what I want. When it implies I am molded on these forms, myself, the unbegotten, I'm begetting something. What am I begetting? I'm begetting a job. So when I fulfill my act and I actually get the job, I am imitating my Father as a dear child. So, be ye imitators of God as dear children. Ephesians 5:1. Imitate God! Exclamation point. Just as he brought these entities into being by using eternal forms, then we take the same forms and we use them to bring in on a lower level that we want to bring into this world. So I want to bring in a job, not only for myself, bring it in for a friend, bring it in for another. So I take anyone, ask him what he wants. Know what he wants? All right. Then test my talent to take from these eternal forms what I think. If I arrange them in a proper manner and then lose myself into this state, I would produce out of it that which in itself it doesn't have. So I take any gathering, you can gather anyone, and gather it in such a manner that when it's gathered together and the conversation starts, the conversation plus those present would imply something other. The something other is what you are begetting. So you are begetting something in this world. So man can beget anything in this world by using these eternal forms. Remember, when you're imagining lovingly for another and your friend is telling you in your imagination about the new job opportunity he's gotten, and you've imagined lovingly that he's going to tell you those exact words, and you're shaking his hand and you're imagining, that's begetting in this world. You, being the creator of that image, begat the event, which begat the job. You are doing the same thing he is doing of you. Let me go back to Blake. When Blake wrote this, it's called The Vision of the Last Judgment. And Blake, I would put my head this night on a block that every word of it is true. Blake never had any ambition to be known in this world, only to transcend it, just to reveal God's vision. And when he said the Bible and the four Gospels and Revelation, he did not mention any of the parts of the epistles, any epistles. He said the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Revelation, these are the eternal visions. Then he mentions the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, the 5 books. Then he mentions read all of them. He implies without naming that these are eternal visions. Now he said, the vision of the last judgment is not allegory, it is not mystery, it is vision. And he tells you exactly what he means by vision as against a myth, as against an allegory. For he saw the entire play as described in the Bible unfolded before his vision. And he tells it exactly these characters, they're only states. But each state in God's play becomes a person. They're all personified. And so in this, let me now requote what I said earlier. Eternity exists, and all things in eternity, independent of creation, which is an act of mercy. So I create from these eternal forms, and they exist forever. Now God is actually in you, in me, begetting himself. As I stand before you, and this is not arrogance on my part, for I did not do it, and yet in another way I did. For when he begot himself in me, I am he. And so all the suffering that I have gone through throughout unnumbered centuries up to this moment, which in his infinite mercy he keeps from me, so I would have no memory of the past, all the suffering. For whom God afflicts for secret ends, he then comforts and heals and calls them friends. Everlasting gospel. So he puts us through all these sufferings. But my Lord, the gift is the gift of creativity. He gives us himself. I mean, really, how could you beget anything if you didn't have his gift in you to beget? Anything you want to create, you can create, and there's plenty of testimonials. One of the projects I'm putting together is putting these little pieces together from the lectures and from friends and experiences, etc. But how could we do it if we weren't given that gift? How could we give ourselves the gift creatively if we weren't given the gift, his gift of creativity? He begat us, and then we beget experience. So when I beheld at the base of my spine this golden radiant light, if you want to read it, read it in Ezekiel 1:27 and 8:2. Here, I beheld it, had the appearance of man, but at what appeared to be the loins, there was a glow of light that rose. And then at what appeared to be the loins, going down was light, just radiant light. That's exactly what it is, right at the base of the loins. And you see it. And strangely enough, you know it is yourself. It would take that liquid golden light to take the impress of what God imagines himself to be when he began to create you in his image. He held you in his mind's eye, and not a thing diverted him. But he had to bring you into that liquid golden state to take the impress of himself as he believed himself to be when he thought of you. All on the mold of man. And then you rose up just like a serpent. Read the 6th chapter of the book of Isaiah. In the year when King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, and then above it was the Seraphim. Well, the Seraphim are described as the most celestial beings, the highest of God's creation. Nothing compares with the wisdom, the might of the Seraphim. They're called fiery serpents with human faces, with a power beyond the wildest dream of man. And we do go up, just as you're told, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. John 3:14. As Moses in the wilderness lifted up the serpent, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And you are lifted up just like that. May I tell you, when it happens to you, it will be just as I have told you. For it has happened to me. I am not speculating. I am speaking from experience. I'm not speaking from theory. And so all these forms, every form in the world, are forever. As far as the body goes, it's forever and doesn't wear out. Who cares what the noise is trying to convince you of? It doesn't wear out. It is forever. I am healthy. Let it be cut apart and buried. It's still forever. Everything this body has ever experienced, it will experience forever. All the bodies. But in it all, God is begetting himself, actually molding and shaping himself, the unbegotten, upon a form called man. So let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Now, we are told, listen to the words. Is this the plural of majesty? Let us make man after our likeness. Well, that's the plural of majesty. Or is it that God actually consults some divine society? Well, you can resolve it. Listen to the words in the 6th chapter, the 4th verse of Deuteronomy. The greatest of all commandments, said he. When asked what is the greatest commandment, he quoted Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Here we find a compound unity. The word is, hear Israel, the Lord. That is Yod-He-Vav-He. That's Jehovah. Our God. That's Elohim. That's plural. Is one Lord. One is Akkad. It's spelt in a way that you would almost hear the word Zion. It's Akkad. Yes. Aleph, Beth, and Daleth. When you see it spelled and you are trying to use your imagination, you can almost hear Zion coming out. But here is a compound unity. One Lord, maker of unnumbered gods. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, our Elohim, is one Lord. So did he consult with those whom he had already brought into the divine council? Well, you be the judge. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Either the plural of majesty, or we go back to the greatest statement, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. But you take me seriously this night and create as your Father is creating you. He is creating you on the mold of man. And you take man and be an imitator of God as a dear child. Create a lovely image of yourself by bringing into your mind's eye men. And so arrange them at a party that they are seeing you as they would see you were you now the man you want to be. What would you like to be? So then arrange them. But if you were the man that you would like to be, would you have a certain circle of friends who would congratulate you on that achievement? Bring them all into the picture and let them see you as such a man. When you see them seeing you as such a man, you are actually shaping yourself on the forms that are forever. You are bringing in and creating as your Father created. Now let us go into the silence. Use this time right now, if you're not driving, and see yourself as your friends would see you, as the man or woman you want to be. Is that married in love with a family? Is that a wealthy new promotion? Now you're the VP, now you're the president. Bring in people into your environment congratulating you on this new achievement. You are now healthy. See yourself being congratulated. See the high fives, see the hugs. Remember always to touch. Touch is very important in these imaginings. It doesn't take long. It's a moment of celebration. You are being congratulated. Congratulations. Your wedding was so spectacular. Congratulations. It's good to see you walking with such a great stride. I've never seen you look better. That's what you're hearing. Congratulations. Wonderful. Isn't it wonderful? Good. Question. Inaudible. The day of the Messiah falls. The good day in, well, not necessarily in the scripture, but it's part of the tradition of the church. The good day. Well, the good day is when man discovers his own creative power. And he uses the messianic power, which is what we've been talking about this whole time. There's only one power. And Messiah is your own wonderful human imagination. Before you are actually born from above, before your resurrection, before the temple is split down from top to bottom, you are free to exercise the Messiah, the power of Messiah. And these are called the days of Messiah. And they come within, I would say, the moment of resurrection, before and after. And these are called the good days, when man knows of a power within him, which is his own imaginative power, so he can create without consulting any person in this world. He doesn't need to pull wires or do anything external to himself. And these are called the good days, the days of Messiah. But the days of Messiah are not the days represented as resurrection. That's something entirely different. But they come within the frame of that coming of Messiah in the individual. So a man, given this thought today, will challenge in the political world, financial world, hasn't the slightest concept of the days of Messiah. Their trust is in the enormous fortunes in the bank or the vault, and their political power. They have no concept. They cannot, blank space. There are men in our world, and you know of them, that they play on prejudice, on superstition. And they were called honest. Well, the mayor of Chicago, he was a very honest man. This is a funny story. I just heard it in a different lecture yesterday. Well, the mayor of Chicago, he was a very honest man. So when he died, he only got a few $1,000s a year as the mayor. But when he died, they found in his many safe deposit vaults about $500,000 in cash. 1963. I Googled this a while ago, and I remember looking him up. I don't know his name offhand, but he was called the honest one. Blank space, because he had relatives who inherited all that money, and blank space, doing a very good job to overcome that. But he was elected year after year on the prejudice of the people. He said, if the King of England came near, I'd spit in his face. Well, the people, they loved that because they were all Irish Catholics and Germans. And they hated everything English. If he came to this city, I would spit in his face. Well, they all cheered him for that, and while he took their profits and blank space. So they paid him $10,000 a year as mayor, but he got the $500,000 in cash in blank space. And that's the entire picture all over the world. They have not a concept of the good days of Messiah. They have not a concept of the good days of Messiah. They have no concept of that blank space picture. But he, as the mayor, catered to a very large Catholic crowd. Blank space, well, that's all over the world. They had found, and from the lecture I heard yesterday, because he's going to move on to something else here, they had found multiple shoeboxes stuffed with cash. Even in the hotel, I think where he was staying, when he actually passed away, they found hidden multiple shoeboxes. And another thing of cash. Another thing said of him was, his attitude was, if you can't get $1,000 payoff, take $500. If you can't get a dinner, take a sandwich. This was his negotiation, or however he saw this thing, was take something, anything, get something, always, from any deal. Have you seen any pictures recently of ex-President Eisenhower coming out of church? But he was, for 8 years, every Monday morning in New York City, there was a photograph of Mr. and Mrs. Eisenhower coming out of church. Now you find every Monday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy coming out of church. And so the whole world thinks how holy and sweet they are. I'm not talking about that. I'm speaking of this eternal drama where God is begetting himself on these eternal structures called man. And when he begets himself, it's like this is a cocoon out of which the great butterfly comes. It is giving birth to God. And the difference between what is coming out, which is God, and what hatched it out is the same difference between the cocoon and the butterfly, altogether different. You read it, the 1st and 8th of Ezekiel and the 6th chapter of Isaiah to see what faintly resembles what is being begotten in you. You read it. Tape ends. What a wonderful, wonderful lecture. Goodness, there's too many great golden nuggets in this. And you know he's coming out in 1963, and he's really, after experiencing the promise, he's really keeping us down in there under the waves, man, under the water, seeing the movement on the face of the waters. He's really delivering the promise fully. So for those of you who are here for the promise, you're going to get a lot of meat and potatoes out of these lectures. If you're here for the law, you can hear it sprinkled in there. But they're very much hardcore, promise focused. It appears to me, and I love it, man. This is like I'm floating on my back in this pool of these lectures. They are wonderful. There's some wonderful pieces in here. Of course, the law is in here too. If you like just the law and you want to get that down and get that down good, go back to the beginning and go through the books. Go to the co-creation bookshelf, I think that's what it's called, and start from those videos from the beginning and just keep going through those, and you're going to get this law down. You're going to get it down pat. And he puts that in here in these later lectures, 63, but he also weaves in the law, but he's very heavy on the promise stuff. So you're getting both. You're getting both barrels here, which is I love it. I actually love it. So hopefully you love that one like I did. We'll see you in the next one.